This week on Nozzlehead Notes Podcast, we've got crops up, nothing down. We're going to talk about that. And we have a special guest with us. So stay tuned for the Nozzlehead Notes Podcast. All right, welcome back, everybody. We're here for another Nozzlehead Notes podcast. We're excited to talk to you today. We've got some interesting topics here. We're going to get kind of our local updates, as what I always do. We've got to talk about crops being up and not having any herbicides down. And then we're also going to have our special guest with us, joining us, weighing in on those topics as well. So, Jared, let's get started here. What are we seeing in your neck of the woods for updates?
I predict this is going to be one of the biggest weeks we're going to see for planting with this warm weather. And frankly, things are going to dry up really quickly, even though we've had rain. It's go time on the calendar. It's going to be an extremely busy week. And matter of fact, the phone calls have followed, to go with it. So lots of questions, lots of things going on. And that makes me feel good. When go time goes, execution and seeing things progress always makes everybody feel productive. And so I'm happy to be there finally. And I think we're going to see a lot get done this week.
I think we're in the same boat, Jared. We were wet last week, but I see it drying up here. We've got a few shower chances coming up the middle of this week. If they stay away, look out, because it's going to be Katie bar the door, because these guys are going to go and go hard. I heard somebody say on one of our calls yesterday that every tractor in their state was going to be moving. I don't know if we're every tractor, but we're going to have a lot of them going, type of thing like that, moving here once this thing breaks loose. And they waited on the rain, and we have some guys that haven't done much because they waited on the rain, but they're going to be itching to go big time now.
Yeah, and that's something that always, I guess, makes me nervous, right? Just a lot of things going on at once. But I think our retail partners and even our growers that spray themselves, they find themselves chasing that planter, trying to get a lot done. We've really hammered on that in the last few weeks. But one thing I want to emphasize going into this week, not only are we planting corn and soybeans, and we've got some that are up of both. Is as an applicator out there, my biggest reminder I've been talking about is knowing what's in your tank, knowing what field you're going to and what crop you're going to. It's easy to get in the wrong spot or easy to forget to wash if you're going back and forth. We can do a lot of damage by getting chemicals in the wrong place. But even more importantly, and I know we're going to talk about this with our guest here in a little bit, is these fields that have crops that are up, making sure we don't have something like an Ingenia in the wrong field, because now's the time we're really thinking about using those types of products early spring, getting rid of some of this mess and emerged weeds. Just knowing where we're at and taking that extra minute in the hectic, busy cycle pays off in the long run. And I know telling people to slow down is not popular, but taking that moment to know where you're at and what you got in your tank is huge.
I think that's a big thing too, Jared. That's a great point on operational logistics. Is yes, it takes time to check what that field is, but what is that, a minute for a phone call back to the office, or even pull up the right map, whatever, it takes a minute. How long is it going to take, one, if you screw up a field and replant? That's huge time-wise. But even if you have a poor application because you're in a hurry and didn't do it right, 1 minute difference, it's going to take you way longer to do a second application or something like that too. And so you say you don't have time, but you also don't have time for the screw ups either. And I know everybody's going hard and you want to do, but just take that second of time to ensure that everything is in order of what you need for that field. And you're going to be way better off than if you're in a hurry and you just, hey, we're going to go and blow and we're going to make sure we get this done as fast as we can. You'd be better off, even if you, like you said, slow down. Maybe when we're doing applications, we slow down because the temptation will be, hey, I'm going to run 14, 15 mile an hour instead of 12. If you have to come back and respray that, all that time you saved is lost.
You still got to make a good application. And I think you made an interesting comment. You said go and blow. I think about blowing the wind around. I mean, this is one thing that I guess I've been on enough times, especially the later in spring we get, and we're still putting burn down products out, especially like Verdict or Sharpen, that really is visible, right, when we get in the wrong spot. Or don't forget Ingenia with those additional restrictions when you got sensitive species downwind, we can't be spraying. There will be opportunities for an applicator to pull into a field and maybe look downwind and say, I can't spray here, right? And so just keep that in mind, because it's pretty easy to forget that these products, we do a good job at putting them where we're supposed to, but the wind can play its own factor. And if we don't know what's downwind and we're not paying attention to that because we're in a rush, that becomes a really escalated scenario with a neighbor or a homeowner that I've been involved in that aren't very fun. And again, all these auxins and these PPO products that we use, popular in the spring because of how good they work. Just remember what's in your tank and what you're spraying to make sure you follow those rules, and we'll have a successful spring. I just can't stress that enough.
I think that's spot on, and that's great advice. And that leads us into our next thing, where we're going to bring in our special guest. All right, welcome back, guys. Here we go. We've got our special guest with us, Mike Probst, tech rep from Illinois. Some of you may recognize Mike from our Nozzlehead videos series that we've been doing over the last couple of years. And so we're excited to have Mike with us. Mike, what's going on in Illinois?
Hey guys, greetings from Central Illinois. Thanks for having me on. What's going on in Illinois? Boy, where do I start? We've got kind of a laundry list of stuff that can be done here. Anywhere from a lot of no-till burn down acres that haven't even got their first burn down application to herbicides that still needed applied. We did manage to get a little bit of a planting window about a week and a half ago to relieve a little bit of the pressure that's been building up, but still definitely behind compared to what we're used to. And then right now we're looking at a very favorable forecast here over the next few days. So a lot of guys already starting to get some work done, but I'd say here the next couple of days, the lid's about to blow off.
So, Mike, for those guys, people not familiar with what's going on in Illinois, what's the weather been like? Wet, dry?
Wet and cool. We just haven't been able to string together very many good working days. It seems like not any major rain events, but they just seem to be coming consistently enough that it doesn't leave enough time to dry out to get much done. And the sun has not helped us out any either. It's been very, very cool, very cloudy, and then you combine that with the wet, and it hasn't gave us many opportunities.
But I mean, Mike, I bet right up next to you here on your west side. I mean, we still have found a few small windows to get some crops in. I mean, I know we've got stuff planted on the west side of the state over here. I mean, you guys surely have something in the ground, I'm guessing?
Sure. Yeah, we do. It's spotty. We haven't been able to get any large scale stuff done, but like I said, we did get a little bit of a window there about a week and a half ago that it dried out enough. And there was some work that was done. Some beans went into the ground, especially in this central Illinois area. I know some folks were looking at the forecast, looked not very favorable for corn. So they decided to put some beans in the ground instead. But that kind of has got me a little bit concerned right now, because even though those days did work well for getting some crops in the ground, very few of those days were very favorable for actually spraying. So I couldn't tell you a number right now, but I think we have a lot of acres out there that got planted, but unfortunately did not manage to get a herbicide applied on them.
Yeah, I think we're going to continue to see more of that, right? I mean, we've always known that planters can outrun the sprayers. And so that is something we probably should have a good discussion on here with you. What's your plan? How are you telling your team to approach those acres, Mike?
Prioritize those. The crops are in the ground. They're going to be coming up, but at the same time, if crops are coming out of the grounds, you can bet that weeds are going to be coming shortly after them, or maybe even faster. So in my opinion, those are the acres that we need to prioritize and try to get that residual established on there. I think for a large number of those acres, plan A is still intact, but we are getting some warm weather starting to show up here over the next few days. So it's going to be really crucial for folks in this area to scout these fields that have been planted, to make sure that the crops aren't starting to come up, beans start necking out of the ground. If that's the case, depending on what plan A was, there's a potential that you might need to revert to something else. And it kind of plays into the weeds also emerging, where I think we're going to get into maybe even a trickier scenario, because there's going to be new crops planted here at the same time. So then you're going to have crops planted, crops emerging, and weeds emerging. So unfortunately, some scouting may be necessary to determine what the best course of action is going to be on some of these acres.
Yeah, Mike, I think we've got, strangely enough, Nebraska was dry for so long, and now we're looking kind of at a similar situation where we had some crops that went in, and then we had stuff that the guys waited, and because it was dry. And then all of a sudden we got a good week of rain weather, wet weather, and now we're dealing with the same situation. We're looking at stuff's coming up when the guys are going to be planting the field right next to it, type of thing. So we're going to have it all over the board. I saw from one of my business reps a report came at the end of the week and said their planting in their territory was between 5 and 80%, depending on where you were. And I think that's probably accurate. It's just some fields are, hey, they're all done. And in some places there's nothing that's been done. And so I think that I like your point about plan A is still in effect for a lot of guys. And I think that's something we don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater type of thing. But I think at the end of the day, you've got to have that plan B, because when you do have the earlier planning come up and those type of things. And when we switch, and later on in a couple of weeks, when we're talking about post apps, man, we're going to have our hands full there.
Yeah, absolutely. It's just something that we have to be ready for. I do have some empathy for our retail friends here in this area. They are a little bit backed up because they're going to be having pre's to put on corn and soybeans. And then, like I mentioned earlier, there's also a significant amount of no-till acres that haven't been touched yet. And it's very clear that they're going to be difficult to control. And so they might have several top priorities that they're trying to get at the same time. So I do sympathize for them as well. But that does bring me to another point that I just wanted to throw in real quick as well. Is I have been getting several questions on a lot of these no-till acres that are getting a little bit tougher, a little hairier, about combining and maybe making some unique tank mixes to try to get control the first time. So my advice has always been to, first of all, make sure that you're following your correct mixing order. That's something that doesn't change no matter what it is that you're approaching. And then also, a jar test never hurts anything. Brady, I believe I've heard you say it's a lot better to make the mistake in a jar than it is to make the mistake in a 1,000-gallon spray.
Yeah, that's we've touched true. On. You don't want to have to clean out a 1,000-gallon sprayer if you could have done it in a jar and just got that down out of the way quickly. But I think that's an excellent point. And we're going to have guys trying to do recipes. There are some good options out there. We talk about spreading on spike corn and different things like that and what we can use. But I think big picture wise, you want to make sure it's all compatible.
Yeah, we've touched on that quite a bit. I'm glad you brought that reminder up. I want to rewind just a little bit, Mike, here. I think there's a couple key reminders that we can give. I know Brady and I talked a couple weeks ago about what to prioritize. Obviously, corn, we've got a little bit more flexibility in. So I guess I want to focus a little bit more on these soybean acres, as you and I probably have maybe more soybeans in the ground. Talking about our plan A, for me, it's a lot of Zidua Pro. And again, I think we've got maybe a little bit of time, maybe not as much as I want, to put this out. Just a couple quick reminders, whether you're in corn or beans. I just want to highlight Zidua Pro's got that PPO in it with Sharpen. Does an excellent job on this burn down and getting rid of some of those emerged weeds. But that cutoff line when we have to switch to plan B will be obviously crop emergence, whether that's corn or soybeans. So if we would get into that plan B, Mike, I think, again, we've still got time for plan A. But if we would get to plan B, what's your next lead on these soybeans that maybe are necking through?
Yeah, once you start to see those crops emerging, you revert to that plan B, which is going to be a residual. We still want to make sure that first and foremost, we're getting that good residual established. So the first thing that comes to mind is Zidua SC. It's a great, established or foundational residual to get in there. You do have that pre-post flexibility. And then depending on whichever soybean trait platform you're using, whether that's Enlist or Extend Flex or another one, you do have that option across those trait platforms. And then depending on if you've got weeds emerging, Zidua is also a very flexible tank mix partner. So for example, in Extend Flex soybeans, you could throw Ingenia in there. If you're in Enlist soybeans, you could throw an Enlist 1 in there to make sure that you're controlling any emerged weeds as well.
And I want to highlight that real quick, Mike. We've got Ingenia has been a great tool. Typically, we think of it as a post product, but this year especially, it's going to have a really nice fit early. And I think we really want to emphasize that with the additional rules in some states like Illinois with cutoff dates and things like that. Don't miss that opportunity to use that tool because it's really got a nice fit right now. I guess while we're on it, Zidua and Ingenia, great tank mix partners. We've had a lot of success both on the research farm and in customer fields with that being a solution. So again, I think a great option there just to highlight that as you move forward on those Extend Flex acres.
That's spot on, Jared. I'm with you there too. And Mike, I think, Mike, you did a great job laying out the options there too. And I think if we can get that Ingenia down early, that's going to be a big piece there. We don't want to miss that application, I think is what it is. And we've seen how the weather's kind of manipulated things and pushed things back. We don't want to be sitting there at the end of June going, man, I never had a chance to get my Ingenia shot out there and I really need it now. So definitely look at opportunities to use it early if we possibly can.
One last question for you, Mike, so we're running up on time. I think the other question I commonly get if we're shifting to that plan B is, how comfortable do you feel as that being your only pass? You ever get that question?
I do get that question. It usually sends a little bit of a chill down my spine. Just because we are reverting to plan B doesn't mean that we need to overhaul the entire program, right? This is just shifting. We're not overhauling. We're just shifting. Instead of going with a pre, our foundational residual is going as an early post. So maybe the timeline shifts overall, but you are still going to go out with that post pass. This is not something that you want to play around with, especially in soybeans. The function of the 2-pass system, the overlapping residuals, it still stands. It's not something that we want to deviate away from just because we had to go from plan A to plan B on the front end.
Yeah, my old adage is that 1-pass people become 2-pass whether they want to or not. And so, it's usually you just don't do this with the idea that, hey, I'm only going to have to make one trip across the field. No, this is your pre. It just happens to be when the crops are up. This is that pass. Now we'll set our post one based on this and where we are. So I think that's an excellent point, Mike, and definitely do that. Guys, that's going to kind of wrap up the time we have here. We don't want to go too long here. So we appreciate Mike joining us. We will have you back. Great to see you, and I'm glad things are getting drier there. And then we will be back next week, and we'll do that. Those of you watching, be sure to like and subscribe our videos on YouTube or like on SoundCloud. Thanks, guys.